Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here at Ideas Week. I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about an important project that we're working on right now, so it's kind of new. My practice, originally the people from Ideas Week asked me what I was going to talk about, and they thought that I would talk about sensuality in architecture, maybe because I designed a building that has curves. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today, although towers are really important to our practice, mainly because of the fact that they are great at being condensers of urban form and reduce the carbon footprint that people have when they live in otherwise spread out formations. So our practice is really focused on cities as one of the key components, understanding cities and dealing with a world that is rapidly urbanizing. We are also looking at ecologies and thinking about while the population of humans is increasing rapidly from 6.9 billion this year to, I think, 9 billion by 2030, at the same time we're having a massive loss of biodiversity. So how do these things intersect? And we're looking also at technologies, and sometimes technology transfers, like this image, which is about capturing on Doppler radar, which is usually used for weather, capturing the migration of birds with that tool. And now the Doppler radar is being used to try to understand more fully bird migration. So how do these things intersect, and how do they intersect through cities? One recent project that looks at this is the Lincoln Park Zoo Nature Boardwalk. We use this project to explore green infrastructure and storing city stormwater, managing the stormwater, making a place for people, and at the same time creating a place that's really like a place where animals come. It's so attractive as a habitat that they voluntarily come to display themselves there, and without cages, and people can enjoy that. But it's an important link in a wildlife corridor. As well, the Northerly Island project works that way. It's a former airstrip and a landing strip for planes. And what we've proposed is ripping out the edges of this and creating a kind of man-made reef that will be a place for spawning fish and creating more habitat for animals, but also making it a place for people with concert venues and other ways that people can enjoy the water, including we're going to be having a shipwreck there under the water that will create animal habitat and be interesting to fish in. So it's looking for the ways all these things intersect. One area, it's great to see like this revival in downtown cities like this, but we've been very attuned to this periphery of the city and the post-industrial kind of disaster that we've inherited, and also what the potential opportunities are for places like this. This is an image of a landfill in the background, some kind of industrial waste that's been dropped off in the Calumet area. So at the same time we talked about migrating birds, people are also migrating around the globe, and they have been. This is a map from 1500, so people have been migrating for a long time, basically moving from the rural condition to the urban condition. And this has been termed the arrival city. So in peripheries all over the world, there are places where villagers and sometimes whole villages come in, set up, and create living spaces. And arrival cities, they really are places that are, their purpose, according to Doug Saunders, who wrote the book and coined the term arrival cities, their purpose is to take rural poor and kind of propel them out into the middle class and urban prosperity. And they should be places that are kind of centers for the new economic and cultural life and education, acculturation. They're almost like assimilation machines, he calls them. And what's interesting, in the United States, we have arrival cities too, only they're happening in the suburbs. We all know the best ethnic food you can get is always in the suburbs these days. So immigrants to suburban communities outnumber immigrants to urban cities 2 to 1 these days. And oftentimes these suburbs are very ill-equipped to handle immigrants and the diversity that they usher in. we should be good at this. We are the immigration nation, right? And these maps show all the different ethnicities changing over the states. This is drawn by county over the years, and this constant flux of immigration and ethnic change moving across the United States. But immigration has become a really vile topic. We haven't been able to move forward on it. And I think one of the main issues of it, or one issue about it, there's many, but one issue about it is that the suburbs are unable to handle this new diversity and change that's occurring in their midst. So the project that I'm going to talk about is a case study for Cicero, which is a Chicago suburb. We all know it as Al Capone's hangout. He moved there to get on the border of Chicago and outside of Chicago's laws. And we started looking at this project because we were asked by MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, to look at suburbs, along with 4 other architects who are studying different suburbs throughout the country. And so we took Cicero as a case study to look at this issue of arrival urbanism. In many ways, the show, by the way, will open in February at MoMA. We did some public workshops over the summer as we were moving through this process, and so probably early February it will be in the gallery show. But what's interesting about Cicero is it actually always was an immigrant hub. In the early years, the 1900s, it was more Lithuanians, Poles, and Czechs, and now it's really people coming from 3 specific states in Mexico directly to Cicero without entering through Chicago. Cicero really was founded as a railroad town on the outskirts of Chicago, but then industry quickly followed and it became a major industrial center. This is the Western Electric Company, which later became AT&T, and that company at one time at its peak, it employed something like 45,000 people. The housing stock are these little bungalows, not really suburban escapes as we think of them, but more like worker housing that lived right across the street from factories. In the 1980s, the factories started to close down and left Cicero, and with them the jobs and all the first wave of immigrants, leaving vacancy and a lot of urban decay. And you can see that these 30% of the land in Cicero is industrial, and it's vacant and abandoned, and it's basically an environmental problem. It's also a problem of loss of jobs and economy, and so it has it could be the next slum. Typically what people that are suburbs instead of cities, what they do is they try to flip this land, and oftentimes they'll put big box stores there or just cap the contamination and put strip malls in. But this only brings back a fraction of the jobs, to work in a place like this, and it really doesn't solve the contamination problem. Over, I think, 1,060 some homes closed and foreclosed in 2010 in Cicero, so it's a huge part of the housing stock. But the big loss is really the jobs. With no jobs, with no big employers, what are people to do that live there? This series shows, and these are actual sites of the foreclosed homes in red, and these are the foreclosed industries. And you can see it's right on the border there of Chicago. These are the spaces of known and suspected industrial era contamination. And the combination of the two, you got foreclosed and contaminated. So what we were trying to do is see if this place, could it be the site of the economic recovery, or will it become the next slum? And so the stakes are very high. What do we need to do about it? So our project that I'm going to show you now just gives some ideas about how we might transform some of these inner ring suburbs into thriving economic opportunities for the people that live there. The first thing we suggest is to do the Bungalow Shuffle. That's really an idea about this housing that was designed for a specific demographic. The nuclear family really doesn't fit there anymore. In this view, you can see the factory right behind the house. But the house, oftentimes, if you look closely, you will see that there'll be 5 or 6 mailboxes on the home. So they're being used in much different ways by a totally different community, a 21st century family, which is in Cicero 88% Latino, and many extended families and diverse families, sometimes unrelated workers, sharing a bungalow house which really doesn't fit them. In addition, because the jobs are no longer in the big factories, people are forced to have multiple jobs, and sometimes they even have small industries in their own garages. So, but this is not allowed, and it's actually illegal in the town of Cicero. So it's making it hard for people to, make money and keep their house. So what we suggested is, and this project is about looking at the program of the bungalow, first of all, and to see if we could kind of break it up and put it back together. So the Bungalow Shuffle, reassemble it to better match the existing and future inhabitants, because all of our suburbs are going to be feeling the same pressure. Putting them back together into a kind of house that could be recombined to fit this changing family structure. And you could buy just what is affordable to you, and that would also help bring the cost down. We took a site that was one of these foreclosed factories, and it had a kind of minimal contaminants, and so it looked like it was possible to reuse, and we wanted to explore that for a possible housing project, housing and work project. The first thing is thinking about phyto remediation. We want to introduce on a massive scale plants, trees that are designed to pull contaminants out of the soil, and we think that starting this now, many of these properties could be ready in 4 or 5 years. Mies van der Rohe imagined the factory in a kind of, he had this great idea about it that was this incredible long spans, and it really sparked his imagination. What we're saying now today, we have to use an ecological imagination and reimagine these places as cleaned, urban, fresh sites. At the same time, we're going to mine the building that's there for its materials, reuse these materials and reconfigure them in new ways. So reducing the amount of energy used by reusing all these materials. Starting out, we will build the cores, vertical circulation, and put those onto the site, and then connect them with a series of community spaces and green spaces, reusing the old existing trusses that were there. And this will also allow spaces to be communal as opposed to everything being private. From there, we would attach the dwelling working units above and below the trusses, and these are the ones that can be recombined. And here you can see a couple examples of how different family structures could recombine some of these uses. So the whole idea is that would reduce the cost because you are buying only what you need at that time. This is an image of the model showing the remediated landscape and the new structure beyond, kind of growing out like a big mushroom out of the old factory. And there would be community gardens and kitchen gardens and things for people to also be able to use and grow their own food. Another important part of it is you see this image, you see the factory site on the left as a site plan, and on the right you can see that how Cicero was. Factories are gray, houses in wood, and separated from green spaces, all in their distinct areas. And we're saying that these things need to be woven together and merged together to create much richer fabric. So that was the kind of monoculture. We're proposing a kind of multiculture with many different uses within it, including a school, vertical neighborhoods, workshops, workspaces that you can rent or buy, even a brewery that uses grain, and then the spent grain goes into a biodigester. So we're actually trying to figure out how to close these loops using the waste materials to produce energy and other things that can produce revenue, such as growing soil, for example, from these biodigesters. This also needs a kind of a financial model. We worked with some different experts on this idea. And the idea would be to, instead of having this casino housing, buying structure that we now have, we would decouple the house itself from the land And that way, people could invest in the house and buy the house still, but not be attached to the land. The land would be held in a trust, and it would somehow be able to cushion the cost of the house from wildly changing over time. So typically in a standard bungalow, you're also paying for a lot of the public infrastructure, whereas in this new model, the infrastructure would be held by the trust, and also the money made from the output would go back into the trust. So some of the foreclosed houses could also be brought into the structure so that people could have flexibility. We don't say that the housing should be torn down. It still works, the bungalows, but they're just brought into the network. And then we found that our whole proposal would probably be illegal if it were proposed, because the zoning actually mandates that these things are separated, even though they're right across the street from each other. So it requires a new kind of interwoven zoning. Main difference is that living and working can be combined. So the idea then is from here, we're going to start out by taking the site, ripping off the roof of the factories, healing the contamination, settling the property, inhabiting it, and you're taking the trees out and repopulating along wildlife corridor routes along the rail and starting to create bigger regional connections. Here's some images just to end up with. This is a real photo of Cicero with our project inserted. Here you can see into one of the structures and down below to all of the workspace and public plazas. There would be a lot more social connections than what currently exists in the suburbs, and a much richer fabric. So living across the street from a factory is no longer a negative thing, it's actually a positive thing. And so finally, this is our new image of what the suburbs will look like. An alley, which is currently used for a lot of commerce, but illegally so, becomes a much more of a public space, and the space is interconnected to the new structure and in and within the garages that people have. So thank you very much. It's Arrival City Urbanism.